Hello, Sooner Nation, OU Insider subscribers, Coach Bryan Clinton enthusiasts, people who they've run out of words to describe this Oklahoma softball team. That's definitely me. This is another episode of the Oklahoma Drill, a podcast fueled by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. This is a special edition of this podcast because the Oklahoma softball team has won its fourth straight NCAA championship, the first team ever in history to accomplish that. It's the program's eighth championship overall. They got it last night with an 8-4 win over Texas, securing the sweep in the Women's College World Series Championship Series. And I cannot think of anybody else I'd want to break down this game, this season, this program with. No other than Coach Sir Esquire, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, not the 10th. Bryan Clinton. Bryan, OU softball. Pretty good. I've heard they're pretty good. Yeah. Your thoughts?
Yeah, team's pretty good.
All right.
All
right.
It's just incredible, man. Like, as the superlatives, you run out. How many different ways can you say it? Unconquerable. The closest thing that we've seen in sports to invincible. They just seem to always find a way. Like that's the thing that stuck out about this team. Even with some more difficult regular season matchups this year, things didn't go their way against the two teams that you really want to beat every year, against Texas and Oklahoma State. But at the end of the day, they turned things on at the end. They went 3-0 against Texas when it really mattered in the Big 12 tournament, and then again in the Women's College World Series, and they just found a way to scratch and claw their way back to another championship. And after the 9-3 loss to Florida on Monday, there was this feeling of, like, is this the end? Like, this cannot be the end of this dynasty. Like, that's just not how this is going to end, right? Because we've seen so much from them, and that was such a shocking loss. And then when Kelly Maxwell in the 4th inning against Florida shut the offense down totally. Like, from that point on, everything we saw from that point on, from 4th inning against Florida in Game 2 on, was the Oklahoma team that we have seen for the past 4 years. It was like when they finally realized, or when they finally brought it all together and realized the moment they were in, they just outshined everybody else. And that's what this group's done. What's really interesting is it was the young players. Like, it was Ella Parker, it was Cassidy Pickering, it was Avery Hodge. Like, it was these ladies that have looked up to Tiari and Jada and Nicole and Kelly and Alyssa and Kinsey. Like, they helped those girls lead those ladies out with perfection. And it was just really, really, really cool.
Well, we'll talk. Look, we've got to get into everything in this pod. We've got to get this World Series, this season, this program. There's so many angles to tackle here, and you just touched on one of them. But I think the best place to start is this game last night that I think can almost get lost in the chaos of everything that comes with winning a 4th straight championship. I think, obviously I mentioned earlier, Oklahoma won this game 8-4. They beat Texas 8-3 on Wednesday to set up this potential title clinching win yesterday. And Bryan, one of the questions I think everybody had going into the game was how is OU going to handle this pitching staff? Because Kelly Maxwell threw 148 pitches in Tuesday's win over Florida that you mentioned. Then she came back and threw 119 pitches against Texas on Wednesday, 267 pitches across 2 games. It was the first time all season she had pitched back-to-back days, and she goes all 15 innings. So I think there was a question, how is OU going to handle this pitching staff? I thought it might be someone not Kelly Maxwell, because this is what Patty has done in the past. This is what she did last year. She pitched Alex Storako in the second game against Florida State for 4 innings, then went to Jordy Ball to close it out. It was somebody else in the circle. It wasn't Nicole Main. It wasn't Kirsten Deal. It was Carly Keeney, who made her first appearance at the World Series in the title clinching game against Texas. And what we learned, Bryan, is that, yeah, Keeney started things off, but that was far from the only plan. And it was clear this coaching staff, they were going to go to Kelly to close it, but they wanted to give Texas all kinds of looks. And by the end of the game, 5 different pitchers made an appearance. It was Carly Keeney. Then it was Peyton Monticelli, who hadn't pitched in a month, comes in with the bases loaded in the 3rd inning. A game that was tied, I believe, 2-2 with the bases loaded. She faces one at bat, grounds that hitter out to end the frame, get OU out of the jam, and then we don't see her again. That's her only appearance after the Big 12 tournament. Then it's Kirsten Deal. Then it's Nicole May, who came in and was sensational in that 5th inning. I think retired the side, had 2 strikeouts in that 5th inning. Then in the middle of the 6th, they go to Kelly Maxwell to close it out. It wasn't the smoothest process. It wasn't perfection. I mean, look, Texas held a lead. Texas held a 3-2 lead. They finished with 7 hits, but it was just enough. It was just enough to get OU over the finish line. Bryan, I was not stunned, but very surprised at how OU handled this. This is not something they've done. They have faced it a ton, teams throwing different pitchers. Texas did it to them Wednesday. They faced a ton of pitchers. They're not a team that throws a ton of pitchers. They did that yesterday. How surprised were you that was the strategy OU implemented? And I guess it's hard to argue with the results, but it was pretty gutsy, right?
Yes, particularly throwing Monticelli into the situation that she was thrown into.
Bases loaded.
Because she's a sophomore.
Yeah.
Like this is somebody who's still kind of finding themselves at this level of softball. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It was a gutsy call. I really liked how you saw Patty Gasso explain it kind of towards the end, where like this was the plan and it worked to perfection in her eyes, that this is exactly how they planned it out. And she talked several times about it being matchup based. And I mean, yeah, it's after. So with Keeney, looking here at the box score, Keeney gives up 4 hits, 2 runs, 4 walks, no strikeouts. She faced 15. The rest of the group combined faced 17 after her. And so, Monticelli goes 0.1 with nothing, just the 1 ground out, which was awesome to see her get that. I mean, just to talk about like a foundational appearance for her going forward. Kirsten Deal gives up a hit, an unearned run, and has a strikeout. Nicole May, the changeup was working, man. Like that was just selfishly so freaking happy for her the way that it ended, because there's been like even going back to Monday, there was a lot of there was a lot of things being said, as there always has been. And, they're not blind to those things. Athletes aren't blind to that. They
No,
see
they're
it, they
not.
hear it. Um, for her to close out the way that she did in dominant I mean, she was marvelous. Like she absolutely was. She was excellent in her 1.2 that she went. I mean, it was really, really impressive. And then, of course, Kelly Maxwell. I almost expected, not a Yankees fan, but I almost expected Enter Sandman to like come on whenever she started trotting out. Like it was just really cool. Like it was a very awesome moment. And the fact that they all, like this whole staff, got to play a part in clinching the four-peat. Like to me, it's just really cool. It's storybook because you're facing the top offense in the country. It takes everybody. Like it was just really cool. And then on top of that, you have all nine batters get on base for Oklahoma. Like it was just a full, complete team effort. And yeah, it was something I won't forget.
Well, and you mentioned the offense there, and obviously we need to talk about Kelly Maxwell in a bit, but I think part of the reason why this strategy worked was because the offense again was just lights out yesterday. And it feels weird to say about an OU offense that was again one of the best in college softball this year, but we had seen some inconsistencies here and there by their standards for a lot of the season. Against Texas, nope. 21 hits across the two games. And again, this is a Texas pitching staff that was top 10 in basically every statistical category the entire year. They had not allowed a run at the World Series before this champ series. And OU was just like, yeah, we don't care that much. And not only do we not care, like everybody is going to get you. Everybody. It's Cassidy Pickering with 2 home runs across the 2 games. Again, she got things started last night. It's Avery Hodge who didn't just step up with Alina Torres out. She was a full-on contributor, both offensively and defensively. I mean, she was like pivotal to these last few games for OU. She was huge again last night. Goes 1 for 2 at the plate with a run. It's Riley Boone going 3 for 3 last night. It's Jada Coleman going 2 for 4. It's Ella Parker again, with a hit, and it's I'll be honest with you. I'm not surprised that OU's offense was going. I'm surprised that they seemingly had no issues against this Texas pitching staff. They didn't seem uncomfortable at all. No. And it was everybody. And that was the one question, Bryan, we talked about that is what's OU going to do? And also I should have shouted out Sydney Sanders also, who should shout out Sydney Sanders. For me personally, not that I criticized her, but I've said more than once, she's got to be more productive. She just has to. She went through a months-long slump at the plate. Yeah. And she was sensational at the World Series. She was great these last couple of games. I mean, simply fantastic. And she was great again last night. She gets the bases loaded double that clears the bases. And that was, I mean, Texas was up 3-2. Texas was winning the game.
Full play.
Yeah. Texas was winning the game. And bit by bit, OU chips away, and it's Sydney Sanders bases loaded double. That was it. OU never gave up the lead. They went from down 3-2 to up 5-3, and that was it. That was basically it. OU added some insurance runs at the end, but that was it. That was going to be the whole thing is, as great as these seniors are, can these other players step up? And last night and these last 2 games, Bryan, they did. They just did, right?
Yeah, the stat that I put together and like kind of my takeaways that really stuck out for me was they had 11 hits. So Texas had 11 hits and 7 runs against Oklahoma over the last 2 days. That doesn't sound bad, especially at the Women's College World Series. That's fairly productive given the level of competition you're playing. Oklahoma had 16 runs on 21 hits against Texas. Texas had given up 0 runs, had outscored opponents 14-0 and given up. Jesse, they one hit all 3 of their opponents coming into the championship series. They gave up 1 hit apiece. And
They scored 10 runs against Florida.
Yeah.
OU scored
Like,
9 in 2 games
right. And
against Florida.
it just, what I think it does is it kind of goes to show you like the value of, and Patty kind of alluded to this in post game, playing one another so familiar with one another. How there's so much value to playing a team like Texas, and for Texas playing a team like Oklahoma. It's not a coincidence that those two teams have faced off against one another in the championship series the last 2 years, or two of the last 3 years. But to see them as often as they did, I think you could argue that Oklahoma was the one team that was the one team that could derail Texas because they are so familiar, and they're the one team that Texas has played all year that is, one, familiar with them, but two, can match them talent wise. And it was this was Oklahoma's series, and I don't know. It just kind of goes to show you there's that crazy statistic out there going into last night in meetings against Texas in the NCAA tournament. Oklahoma going into last night was 6-0 and had outscored them 55-14, I believe. So you throw in last night and it's 7-0 and 63-18 over those games. And it's, I know Oklahoma's had like this crazy success over the years, but that is like long standing. It shows you the value of having Patty Gasso as your head coach, because if she sees something happen and it's something that she can change, you're not going to have the same mistakes the second time or the next time that you play them. And that's why she is who she is. There's not very many coaches out there that have won 8 titles, and there's a reason for that. I mean, she's just absolutely incredible at what she does.
I think there was that feeling of, I mean, it was not an easy road for OU to get to the champ series, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But there was that feeling that once they got there, it was just it was going to be hard to see them not winning. Now, I thought it would be a lot harder. I actually thought Texas might get a game, but coming into the series, I thought Texas might get one. But OU just outplayed them. OU was just a better team, and I think you saw the growth that this team has had from that regular season series in Austin to now. And I think that's the next thing I want to talk about. But before we do that, Bryan, I believe you have a very nice message from the sponsor of this video, Manscaped, to all of our loyal listeners. Bryan, if you want to do the honors.
So Father's Day is coming up, and fellas, if you haven't purchased a Father's Day gift yet. Yeah, we thought so. Today's episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the leaders in below the waist grooming. Maybe your pops has had a bush since the 70s, and that's okay. Our friends at Manscaped have crafted the total package for his special day. Whether it's for the boys downstairs, his beard, or even the best pair of underwear out there, Manscaped has his bases covered. Head over to manscaped.com and get 20% off plus free shipping with the code OUinsider. From daddy to zaddy, trust Manscaped. That beard trimmer that your dad's been using since you were in grade school? Yeah, it probably needs to be upgraded at this point. That's where we're bringing in the Beard Hedger Pro Kit, the complete beard maintenance kit for all the bearding kings. Jesse, yes, yep. Looks good, man. That set of underwear that he got for Christmas a decade ago, those definitely need to be thrown out and upgraded. And what better way to do that than with Manscaped's Boxers 2.0? They were designed with a simple mission to make the most comfortable boxers a man could buy, and it starts with the Jewel Pouch, a dedicated space that cradles your stones in a place with a perforated performance fabric for extra breathability. So remember, guys, get 20% off and free shipping if you use the code OUinsider at manscaped.com. That is 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com, and use code OUinsider. Never forget where you came from, if you know what I mean. Happy Father's Day from Manscaped.
I'm going to clip you saying zaddy, and I'm going to use it as my ringtone I don't know if people still do ringtones. That may be like from
Yes.
15 years ago, but I'm going to bring ringtones back, and it's just going to be you saying Zaddy.
I'll put it on my stream deck so we can just like bring it bring it to
Yes.
life every once in a while.
Coming to an Oklahoma Drill podcast near you. Zaddy.
Zaddy.
Bryan, I wanted to talk about growth and adversity for this team because that, I think, more than anything, is what not only stood out to me as someone who watched every single game this season, was at every single home game and every single postseason game, was seeing the growth of this team, and that got solidified being at the post-game press conference last night. And that was, I think that was the common theme among everything, was as amazing as this run is, and we'll really get into that in a second. But this was, I think the common sentiment was this was probably the hardest one of all, the hardest championship of all for this team for a lot of different reasons. And Patty said this was the toughest coaching season. The players said this was the toughest championship to win. They talked about expectations. They talked about feeling pressure. They talked about the highs and lows of the losses this season. I mean, this is a senior class that went 235 and 15 the last 4 seasons, but 8 of those losses came this season. And I think we saw this team grow so much because there were some relatively low moments. I mean, you think about the Louisiana loss that ended their winning streak. Think about the losses at Texas. Think about the BYU loss at home. Think about the back-to-back losses to Oklahoma State. I think this regular season was really tough for them in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways that they didn't expect it to be tough. And even at the World Series, man, I mean, I think we saw this team hit another gear in the postseason. I mean, they were incredible during the Big 12 tournament, the regional, the super regional, but they still had to battle through it. Man, their season was on the line on Tuesday.
Yep.
They were down 5-2. They were losing going into the 6th inning. That game had to go to extra innings. They won 1-0 against UCLA on Saturday. This was not easy. And at times where last year, where not that it was ever easy, but where it just was like, okay, outside of that Baylor game, it's like, I just don't really see them getting challenged. That is not what happened this year. What stood out to you about the way this team handled all of that adversity? I mean, you can be honest like me. I'll be honest. I would have picked Oklahoma if I picked a winner going into the playoffs, but I was less confident about that than I've ever been.
Yes.
What stood out to you about the adversity, and what does, I don't even know, it's hard not to get into hyperbole. Did you feel that relief from this team after getting through all of that? And what do you think that says about this program to admittedly battle through some things to get to this point?
So the quote that stands out with regard to this is something that Patty was quoting somebody else about heavy is the head that wears the crown.
I asked her that question. She answered that too.
Did.
I
You
did.
sure did. And great question, by the way.
Thank you.
It just, to me, there are, it's so hard to win a national championship in anything.
Anything.
It's so hard to do that.
It's hard to win a state championship in high school.
Correct. It's difficult because it takes, one, you have to be talented enough. 2, you have to be fortunate enough because things have to go your way in some situations. If the ball, like for instance, if the home run that barely cleared Florida's left fielder's glove, like if that's 2 inches shorter, I mean, we might be talking about a totally different outcome to the end of the year. I mean, who knows? So you have to be fortunate, but the consistency and the level of dominance that we saw from this staff, or from this entire team over the last 4 years, regardless of who it was in the circle or in the batter's box. You had Jordy Ball and Jocelyn Allo, Giselle Juarez, You had all of these pivotal big time players come and go, and OU still dominated. Like they still did it. Sure, there's like that, that core five stuck around and were there and really paid a big part of this. But we talked about it earlier in the year in one of our episodes about the impact of not having Grace Lyons on this team. It really feels like over the last several weeks that those seniors stepped into that role. Like, not that they weren't beforehand. I'm not trying to take anything away from them throughout the regular season. That's not at all what I'm getting at. But it feels as if they realized, okay, my time here is coming to an end. It's not a bad thing though. Like they were just excited about the next game and like that. It really felt like they really after that Florida loss, and when they picked things back up, it just feels as if they started playing free again. I know Tiara Jennings went over 4 last night. It just wasn't her night, but the impact that she had in the games prior to that, the impact that the other seniors had, seeing just how excited they were for Sid Sanders and for the freshmen when Pickering or when Parker made a huge play, like it just they stepped into this leadership role with everything that they had, and that growth that you talk about, I think that's really where it showed up because those hard moments, I think they showed their character and who they were as teammates. And if for nothing else, like that just sets a precedent and a tone for the players that are coming back in 25. Like the expectation, how to handle things with grace. And this team, the energy that they played with, like it was never ending. They were always think about that. Like like that's where I'll leave you. That's the question I'll leave you with on this is how in the world do you have the excitement and the energy level that Jada Coleman and Riley Boone and Eliza Brito had at the plate every game for 3 or 4 years that they did? Like it wasn't a show. It wasn't putting on, they weren't putting on for anybody. That's just who they are. And it all just came to a head last night. And it was truly an honor to watch it. Like it was very, very cool just to see them do what they've done. And I think there's this fatigue. There's fatigue that around the rest of the country. Oklahoma won another one. But I think people are letting that frame this in the wrong way. People aren't realizing just how incredible it is in the game of softball, because softball and baseball have these things can go so differently in an inning. There's just so much that can happen. For them to have the level of dominance that they did over 4 years is just crazy. And that group last night, just ending it the way that he did. Growth is you nailed it. That's exactly what it did.
Well, and that was one of the things. I think there were 2 things that stood out to me in that regard. Is one, just listen to what the players said after the game and look at what they've tweeted since the game last night. They saw everything. They see everything on social media. Don't think they don't see it, and don't think they don't remember it, and don't think that doesn't propel them. It absolutely does. And I thought it was pretty interesting to hear. I think it was Jada and Kinsey and Tiari specifically talk about how they felt those expectations early on. And when they lost those games, they saw the criticism. They saw people happy that they were losing. I thought that was really, really interesting, that you would think, not you would think, but a dynasty like this, and that's what this is. I think we throw the word dynasty around too much. This is beyond a dynasty. This is dynasty to a T and then some. I mean, this is what has happened. I think it's pretty interesting that there always was this hunger for more. They didn't get torn apart. They didn't get shoved into the ground, even when there were moments where that could have happened, because the expectations and the pressure and the hostility was higher this year than it's ever been. And you talk about the energy. That was one of the other things too, is I think as far as growth, you want to talk about somebody who grew this season. I think it's Patty Gasso. And that was one of the things that stood out to me. And Patty's answer to me yesterday was she actually said the old coach in me would look at some of the things that these players do and say, no, we can't have that. She actually mentioned, I didn't even ask about this, but the throwing the bats down on walks specifically. She was like, I used to say no because they do that in practice too. But she said she had to come to a place with this generation, with this group of seniors, that I need to let them be who they are, even if it rubs some people the wrong way. And I think that also speaks to, we talk about how different, like a team can have different chemistry every year, can have different vibes every year. I think that's one of the also the unspoken parts about winning championships is the growth it takes from the coach and the vibe you cultivate and how everybody fits into that. And I think that's the other thing is Patty at any point didn't tell them, hey, let's knock it off, or hey, when we get down, let's change things. It's doubling down on who they are, who these players are. And I think that's what got them here. That's really what got them here. And I think that was the thing. I mean, look, after the Oklahoma State loss, the second one, that shook them. It 100% shook them. I mean, Alyssa Brito was emotional in the post-game press conference after that. Those losses meant something to them. And I think it put them in a place where I think it gave them a little bit of an identity crisis. And I think what Patty and this coaching staff did was they doubled down on what makes them them and what got them this far. And that doesn't mean it was all sunshine and rainbows after that Oklahoma State loss. I thought their season, I was writing, and you mentioned this for people behind the scene or for people at home.
I didn't share that, by the way. I know. I know I threatened blackmail, but
well, I feel so stupid now because why did I doubt this Oklahoma softball team? Not that I doubted it, but in the fifth inning, in that second game against Florida, I started the process of writing the OU lost this game and the season's over article. It was going to be the story was going to be what a hell of a season. Look, they got to the Final Four. Doesn't matter if they've been here or not. Doesn't matter if it's even a disappointment. Getting here is an accomplishment. I was writing it, and then OU proved me and so many other people, like they have all the time, proved they still had it in them. And it's hard to really quantify that, which is why another reason why I think this group of seniors is just, and look, there's 10 seniors on this team and they all deserve credit. We're going to talk about Kelly Maxwell in a second, but Jada Coleman, Tiari Jennings, Kinsey Hansen, Riley Boone, Nicole May, this group of 5 seniors that have been with OU the entire way. They don't even know they don't know what it's like to not win a championship. They've literally never done it. They've never not won a championship. And 235 wins, man, 235-15, 3 Big 12 regular season championships, 3 Big 12 tournament championships. They went 21-4 at the World Series. 21-4. I think you have to, when greatness like this happens, and when greatness like this happens, especially in a year like this, where it becomes even more historic and it wasn't easy, I think you have to take a moment, regardless of who you're a fan of, regardless if you like the sport or not. I think you have to take a moment to really let this set in, not only how special this program is, but this group of seniors doing something that I just don't think is ever going to be done again. I don't know. Bryan, you try to put it in words because I don't know if I can. What they have done simply transcends sports. We don't see stuff like this ever. We just don't. We don't see this. Put it in words so I don't have to.
So the way that I would try and explain it is, so you threw out 20, 235-15. They won 49% of their games by shutout.
I didn't. Oh my
They
God.
won 56% of their games by run rule, 131 run rule victories from the senior class.
God.
They were never shut out. They were never run ruled. And they were 201-0 when they got a lead of 4 runs or more. They never had somebody come back and beat them after they got 4 runs. I think what defines this group is the greatest accomplishment in a given sport is that national championship. You have your you have your individual awards, sure. But every time you ask a quarterback if he would trade that Heisman Trophy in for a national championship, it's no question. Like there's no question about it. National championship is the greatest accomplishment in any given sport. You literally, like, there's nothing else you could have asked the senior group to do. They could not have accomplished more than they did. They couldn't have. There's nothing else for them to have done. Like it, they did it, and I just think, again, that's where I was saying the fatigue that sets in from the rest of the country when the complaint becomes, well, it's just not fair because Oklahoma plays in front of a loaded fan base every year at the Women's College World Series.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, like that lazy of a take is like, okay, then why is Nebraska not winning every single championship there is to be won in Omaha in baseball? Like we're getting to that point where it just doesn't make sense. That people are looking for anything that they can to explain why Oklahoma is doing this and why it's unfair, because that's the only explanation that can make sense to them. There's no way around it. So, for them to have won 4 straight, but for Oklahoma to have won 6 of the last 8 national titles, I mean, dude, just nuts. Absolutely nuts.
Well, and look, Alyssa Brito is not included in that core 5, but obviously Alyssa Brito was huge. These other seniors, played a huge role. One of those seniors that isn't a core 5, but solidified herself in Oklahoma lore forever, is Kelly Maxwell, who covering Kelly Maxwell this season was pretty interesting, Bryan, because Kelly didn't say a lot. She was pretty quiet, and that's not a criticism at all. It's just she was pretty quiet, and she opened up a little bit last night for the first time and talked about how tough this transition was. To come from Oklahoma State to Oklahoma was not easy. I think it was something she dealt with all year. We saw it in that Oklahoma State series to end the regular season that it was a lot for her. We saw that. And she didn't play particularly well against Duke to start the World Series. But this season as a whole, she was fantastic. And these last 3 games to close out last night, what she did against Florida, what she did against Texas, she went 12 innings against those 2 teams and gave up, or in her last 12 innings, starting with the 4th inning against Florida and the whole Texas game, she gave up 8 hits. She gave up, I think, 4 runs, struck out 8. She had 11 strikeouts in the win over UCLA. Sorry, I should have mentioned the UCLA game on Saturday. Struck out 11, held a red-hot UCLA team to 0 runs. I think it was pretty clear that for OU to win again, they were going to need Kelly Maxwell to be special. And she was special, man. And I voted for her for most outstanding player.
Yeah.
It was one of the easiest decisions I've ever made. And the thing I kept on thinking last night, Bryan, was considering what this team lost and considering they lost Jordy Ball, and this isn't a knock on any of the other players on that pitching staff. A lot of them had really good moments this year. The thing I kept on thinking was, it's going to be easy to say, oh, well, Kelly Maxwell joined a juggernaut and that's why she won. I think that not only discredits what she did this year, but I kept the thing I was thinking last night was, where is this OU softball team if Kelly Maxwell's not on it right now? Are they celebrating the national championship? I'm not saying they would. There's no way they could have won, but I don't know, man. I don't know where this softball team does. I think Kelly Maxwell had to be on this team for this team to win.
Absolutely.
Of course, they needed the offense,
Yes.
and they needed, of course.
Yeah.
I don't know if they win if Kelly Maxwell doesn't, and that speaks to this program's ability to bring her in and make her one of their own, get her comfortable, and that speaks to her work ethic. That speaks to her putting her money where her mouth was. It was a risky, gutsy decision to come from Oklahoma State to Oklahoma. She put her money where her mouth was. She was probably the most pivotal part of this title run. What do you even say about Kelly Maxwell?
It's just incredible. It's incredible that you can have a player of Jordy Ball's caliber leave the program to go and find something that she needed and replace that with a name like Kelly Maxwell. My child is standing outside my door here wanting me to hold her, so I'll wrap this thought up quickly. But there's just not very many players on that caliber in the circle in the country. You've got Nigel Kennedy, you've got Jordy Ball, Kelly Maxwell's up there, and maybe a handful more that have that level of play in them. And for her to step in and for her to elevate her game to the point that she did in the postseason is really what was impressive, because that growth, what she did over the last 4 or 5 outings, like that was some of the best ball that we've seen from her in her entire career. And that dates back to a World Series showing in 2021 that was just next level. And so, yeah, the showing from her yesterday, and particularly what we saw on Wednesday, just really cool. I mean, for that to come full circle and for her to finally get to that point of winning a championship and being a part of that series, I mean, she earned it. She put her work in. Like what she did with Oklahoma State, who is a very good program in their own right, for her to finally get the opportunity to do this in her home state for a team that she grew up rooting for, it just doesn't get any better than that.
It doesn't. And I think to look, we could go on and on about this softball team. We could absolutely go on and on. I think the one thing that I have gotten from as I monologue with Bryan taking care of more important family matters, this is what I'll say to people. I've already had a few people ask me. Where does this softball team go from here? What does next season look like? What does this offseason look like? I would say 3 things to that end. I would say 1, don't worry about that. There's time to worry about that. Let's let this marinate and appreciate this greatness for what it is, and the fact that we probably won't ever see it again from any program, from a senior class like this. That's 1. 2, I think Ella Parker and Cassidy Pickering showed you'd be hard pressed to find a better nucleus and 2 better building blocks than what those 2 showed.
Speaking of them, did you hear the stat that Beth Moen shared last night?
No, what'd she say?
That's the first freshman duo in softball history to have 10+ home runs and 50+ RBIs in the same season. The fact that Tiare Jennings and Jada Coleman hadn't done that before, and we've already seen that from Pickering and Parker, future's bright. Don't worry.
They weren't just good as freshmen. They were just good, period. And to step into a lineup like this and not only be good, but essential ingredients in this lineup. I don't know if OU beats Florida without Ella Parker on Tuesday. And Cassie Pickering hit 2 bombs in the champ series in both games. I voted both of them, or they both made the all tournament team at the World Series. I voted both of them on. Again, that was just an easy decision for me. OU had 5 players make it. 2 of them were freshmen. That's going to be fine. That doesn't mean OU doesn't have questions, and they're not the only 2 players coming back, but there's other talented players coming back. OU's got an incredible freshman class. That doesn't mean there's not questions. OU's going to have a lot of work to do in this transfer portal, which leads me to, and I'll say real quick that we will break down more of the offseason later. I think you and I both just wanted to appreciate this for what it is this year, or for what this team did this season. that leads me to the third thing. I told some people a few weeks ago that when it comes to this offseason, that considering the amount of players that OU is losing, the amount of high level, high caliber superstar players that they're losing, the pitch for players in the portal writes itself.
Yep.
Come be a part of not only a team that tries to go win 5, but also the path to playing time is more direct and more immediate than it has been in years for anybody coming into the program, considering what OU's losing. But also, the rumblings are that this portal is going to be absolutely insane, that it's going to be crazy. I think OU is going to be in the mix for a lot of different players.
Yep.
There's rumblings about a certain pitcher out at Stanford, and that's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. I'm not saying anything.
Bobby.
I'm not saying anything. I am not. All I'm saying is there's a certain pitcher out in Stanford that there's some real questions about what her future looks like. That's all I'm saying. I think we're going to dive into all that later, but I think there's a time and place to talk about all that stuff. And for now, I think it's just about appreciating this team and what they did. So, Bryan, in the interest of not saying a million other things that we could say, put a bow on this season and what we just witnessed.
It's never been done before. It probably won't happen again. That's how special it is. It's a generational team that, I mean, the Yankees in the 20s, the Patriots run from 2000 to 2018 or 2019, whenever that was. You know, I just the Lakers run that they had, UCLA basketball under Wooden, Patty Gasso Sooners. Like, there's just not very many of these teams, of these programs that rise and continue to rise and don't just fall off after a few years. I mean, Patty Gasso won 2 titles from 2000 to 2013. She's won 6 of the last 8. Like that, I mean, it speaks for itself. It's absolutely incredible that Oklahoma had 8 years ago. Oklahoma had 2 national titles in softball. We've got 8 now. Like, that speaks for itself.
Second most tied with Arizona in all of softball programs
in a decade.
Yep. It's crazy, man. But look, we've got more softball content coming from you and I, both on this podcast and over. Huh?
And Blakely.
And Blakely, of course. Blakely making her for her debut on the Oklahoma Drill podcast.
You say hi? No, we're not gonna say hi.
Hey, I'm cranky and sleepy too. It's been a long week, man. A lot of trips to Oklahoma City and back.
Yep.
I get it. We're gonna have more softball content. Look, SEC Media Days for football is right around the corner. OU joins the SEC in 3 weeks. But we're gonna head to some much needed rest too, the two of us. But I think for both of us, want to say thank you to everybody out there who not only have been supporting this podcast throughout softball season, but just throughout since we started this almost a year ago. It's been incredible. It's been a lot of fun, but appreciate you guys' support. Appreciate you guys sticking with us. And we've got more Oklahoma Drill. If you want it, it's coming. Thoughts?
Good. I like it. It's National Donut Day.
Ooh.
So go get you a Krispy Kreme.
I haven't had a donut in a minute.
But yeah, podcast has been you just blew my mind that it's been a year.
Yeah, almost.
I can't believe that in August it'll have been a year.
Yep.
So.
Just crazy. But we couldn't do this without people listening and supporting us. So we appreciate you guys, and OU softball. Pretty good, I would say, to go back to what we said at the beginning. It's pretty good. OU softball team. Pretty good. We'll be back with you next week to talk a little bit more about the offseason for softball and also to pick up with some football talk. We'll be back next Wednesday. Until then, we'll see you guys on the Oklahoma Drill Podcast.